Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Agasicles, famous managing editor at Geeks Worldwide, here opening up another episode of our tech show podcast, The Forge. And as always, I have with me my faithful co-host, Mr. Kyle.
This
Awesome.
couldn't be more true than anything else in life.
That's right. The Forge is a Sunday morning show, so it's always kind of the breakfast club here.
That it is.
And we've always got highly caffeinated beverages to get us through the show. So we are recording just before 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Sunday, the 24th of April. This is episode number 5. And yes, there are some lost episodes that are not yet posted. They are on our YouTube channel. They're not yet up on the site, but hopefully I'll be catching that up fairly soon. So let's get started right away with our first discussion topic. What tech do you use in your car? So this was inspired because Tab Times ran an article about best iPad car mounts. And often when I'm driving around, I love my tablets as, situational awareness devices and kind of data aggregators for my personal time management. And often I say, I just need to get like a mount and put like my iPad mini in the car. But Kyle, do you have anything permanently mounted in your vehicle?
The only thing permanently mounted in my vehicle is one of those tape deck to headphone buds ear plugins, because my car is so old I don't have a CD player or an auxiliary input, and my charger. Otherwise, everything's freeform, because sometimes I like to throw it under my lap if I'm on a long drive and I know I'm expecting a call. Otherwise, it goes in the seat next to me if I don't want to deal with it because of traffic. But that's it.
Yeah. I lived in that space and time. I definitely feel you. It so happens that as a matter of course of getting married, I had to get rid of my Ford Mustang Mach 1 because it was not compatible with married life.
I don't know. Married life may not have been compatible with the Mustang.
Yeah, it was time to get it. It was one of those things when I used to look at it in the parking lot of my apartment. I used to be like, dude, I got to get rid of that car. Now, once you were in it driving, it was great, but I was constantly reminded of like how, as I started to enter my 30s and 40s, I was like sitting on the ground, and it was not the most comfortable thing to drive. So
no, they're not.
So I don't miss it. I only want a car like that again if it's like a 10-minute car, like drive it to the grocery store and back.
Or if you're going on like a weekend trip with just the missus.
Right.
Like then it's fun too. So in other words, that's like when the kids are old enough.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I lived through that, and I had to. And that was one of the reasons why I don't miss it as well, because my Hondas are much more technologically capable with auxiliary ports, USB, and iPod compatible ports. But yeah, when I was in the Mustang, I had to. I had like the tape. I didn't use the tape deck thing. I used the FM transmitter, which is so painful. Because it has to it actually broadcasts from your stereo unit to the little dongle thing. It actually transmits to your antenna on the back of the car, and then sends it back in through the. So horrible.
A clever hack for the time, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The way that they're like, you know what, people want to be able to listen to their iPad or their iPod rather,
right.
But we don't quite have continuity across all cars yet to where there's an auxiliary input. So let's create something that lets them do that. And it's a brilliant solution for the time. In fact, I was tempted the other day to pick up it was an all-in-one. It was a charger that had Bluetooth that would broadcast to FM.
Okay. Nice.
I was tempted.
Right.
I avoided that temptation. I'm happy with my solution now, and I don't need more stuff going on. But
and I had to go with that vacuum tube type technology because cars were weird, because they were, that Mustang was not so advanced that it had aux ports and USB ports, but it was so advanced that it had deleted the tape deck. So my head unit just had stereo and a CD player. And then I had it patched into like a 10 disc CD changer in the trunk. But like because it skipped the tape deck, it made me go. It was really funny, an interesting study on tech, because the tech industry actually had to go backwards to an older technology to kind of loop around and make things compatible.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you, I don't have anything permanently mounted in either one of my cars. Yeah, so everything that I do is all like carrying in and carrying out. So on that topic, what kind of things do you carry with you in the car for like your daily commute from a technology perspective?
So the things that stay in my car that aren't part, so I'm an IT person, and I do a lot of site visits. And so my trunk is always full of stock.
Yeah.
Routers, cables, you name it. So excluding all that, the stuff that I carry personally is always going to be my laptop. I always have my iPad, but I rarely use it.
Okay.
And my phone and a backpack to carry it all in, and that's it. I keep it pretty simple and to the point. I try to consolidate as much as I can, because there was a point in time where I started to sprawl across all the devices that I could, and that's just, it's unwieldy and not practical.
Okay. Now for actual use in the car, is the only thing out of that kit then your phone?
My phone. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a time where I'd use my iPad, but
yeah,
that was only because it was on the company data network, which was unlimited.
right,
but that was years ago, and we all know unlimited data plans at one point went the way of the dodo bird, but seem to be making a comeback now. Yeah. But yeah, no, everything is on the phone, man. For consumption in the car, it's all on the phone.
Right.
Because all I listen to in the car is podcasts.
Okay.
So
now, what storage size? Because you're an iPhone user, right?
Yeah, I got the 64 gig.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So for me, what do I carry on a daily basis? I carry my smartphone with me, and I went with for two of the phones, so I have the Nexus 6P that's at 128 gigs, and the iPhone 6S that's at 128 gigs, and that it's such a wonderful experience, because anytime that I don't have media in the car to listen to, podcasts and whatnot, I'm able to put my entire music collection on those phones and have them with me in the car, and that's so huge, because my car has a USB port, and when I first got the cars, what I used to do is I used to always carry an iPod, but the thing was what I was doing is I would typically pick an iPod that I would just put in the car and leave it for the week.
Yeah.
And so on Sunday, I would load it up with enough podcasts for the week, stick it in the car. Well, I think I took a trip, maybe I went on travel and came back, and it was over the summer. And when I came back, that iPod was dead. It had just baked in the heat. And I was like, and so my problem was, well, I don't know if this thing failed after it had been in the car for 5 days or 1 day. Yeah. So I just stopped kind of permanently leaving an iPod in the car. And for a little while, I was, taking the iPod out every day, but I was like, this is a pain. So what I eventually settled on, not just because of the heat, but also because of the extreme pain that is sometimes syncing podcasts with an iPod using iTunes, before they broke the podcast thing out into its own separate app.
Yeah.
And I haven't even gone back to that app since I just dropped managing my podcast through iTunes. Now I have all of the podcasts that I listen to bookmarked in my browser, and I just go to their RSS feed and directly download the podcast. Sometimes on a phone, I will have a podcast app that I have set to never auto download a podcast. I'm like, and what I use instead is I use USB thumb drives, which is wonderful, because a thumb drive I can throw in a PC, I can put podcasts on it in 5 minutes. It's not syncing, it's just drag and drop, copy and paste, and I grab the thumb drive and I go and I stick that in the car. And so that's awesome. And then my backup is either using all the music, on a phone, or or using a podcast app, or going to the website on a phone, downloading it to the phone, and and playing it using a stereo cable that I have to go into the aux port.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. So I pretty much carry my phone, thumb drives, and I think that's it.
I do carry lots of thumb drives.
Yeah. I've been thinking, I have been considering, since my iPad Pro is 128 gigs, also has all my music on it, and actually has speakers that are loud enough, because I originally tried just playing podcasts back on my phone in the car, and the speakers just aren't, no phone speakers loud enough really to overcome, the highway noise. But the iPad Pro is, so I might start carrying that every once in a while.
One thing I did do for a while, I had received, Monoprice had sent me a little Bluetooth speaker about yay big.
Right.
And for the week that I was using it heavily for like my review on it, I had, instead of using my cassette to headphone adapter, I just connected to that the whole week, and I just set it up on my dashboard. And there was one name that stands out in my mind that kind of proved this little speaker for me in terms of just usability, not necessarily quality, but usability. It's pouring down rain. Okay. I was driving on the freeway. Yep. Like, the freeways were starting to flood. It was pouring that hard. So you add freeway noise plus water from the freeway plus the heavy rain on the car, and I could listen to my podcast perfectly fine.
Nice.
And that's one thing that I've thought about, just grabbing a second one to keep in my car all the time, is because the speaker just worked. I mean, it's simple. The battery life on it was perfectly fine. I could charge it and so on. So it was one of those things that, for those of you who are listening to our podcast this morning, our host, Agasicles, is entertaining a young Stamos right now. The thing is that parenthood never stops, ladies and gentlemen, and you're witnessing it live, or not if you're not watching.
Okay, so I think we figured out where the purse is. It's a very rare interruption.
It's all good. I had commentary for it and everything.
Good. No, that's awesome. Yeah, so one of the cars I drive is older than the more modern cars we have, and it same thing, has no aux port. I guess it has a cassette deck, and I've been thinking, why don't I just buy like a $50 like Bluetooth speaker and just throw it in there. There's a little storage container under the seat. I could just drop it in there and just have it in there all the time, and figure out how to keep it charged. Anything differently that you do when you head out on a longer trip on travel?
Not really, because I keep my car charger in my. If we're on a longer trip, we're in my wife's car, which is a newer Explorer, and so we've got an auxiliary cable. So the only thing that changes is I have to listen to the radio, because she doesn't like my podcasts, because she gets bored quickly with people just talking. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is great content.
Right.
And she's like, oh, shoot me now. But no, for the most part, that backpack goes with me everywhere. I mean, I jokingly call it my man purse, my geek purse, because it's got all my stuff, and I always have a handful of comics in there too, on the off chance I have about 15 or 20 minutes, I can get through an issue. And
right.
But yeah, that thing goes with me everywhere.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, and I don't do anything else different when I go on a longer trip. I used to sometimes insist on carrying my 160 gig iPod, my iPod Classic, but again, with the phones and the tablets now, that's kind of not an absolute need. And the thumb drives, like I said, keeps me from having to get onto a laptop and actually sync. So very cool.
And not only that, it's so easy to stream stuff nowadays, and streaming content doesn't eat up that much bandwidth. And if even a reasonably sized data plan, that's nothing huge, but you can get a lot done streaming too. And that's the other nice thing, is that I think on my wife's plan, we've got her on like a 3 or 4 gig plan. Okay. And sometimes she'll have to stream And lately, she's been having to use. My daughter loves her Kindle for kids, and she's been using that lately. But it doesn't have a 3G or a cellular data connection. So always been turning her phone into a hotspot to let my daughter watch stuff. And even something like that, it's just a simple. It works, and it's still just as cheap and effective. And it's my turn to have a visitor.
Yeah, I used to turn to that option every once in a while for my morning commute, which is any 20 to 25 minutes, depending. And I'll sometimes stream, like on my Galaxy Note 5, since they don't make a 128 gig SKU for that. Sometimes I'll stream from Google Play Music. So yeah, very cool. Nice breakdown. So our second discussion topic for this time, and I always scramble the order, so I put both the discussion topics up front for this episode. I want to kind of inquire, we're heading into spring time. I think my belief is that every hardcore, particularly a PC master race, geek, nerd, has some type of schedule for doing their recapitalization and upgrades, whatever that may be. And of course, that schedule is often ad hoc, but it's still a schedule. So I know for me, my thing now is, I don't always stick to it. I'm trying, but is typically to recapitalize PCs, laptops and desktops on a 2-year cycle at its fastest. And tablets and phones can be as little as 12 months. Again, that's the minimum time that I try and get out of them, unless something is on death watch because it's just a horrible device. I do reserve the right to vote any device off the island and replace it if it's not meeting my needs. So I wanted to kind of talk about what's our next major upgrade and kind of what we see out on the landscape in any given product category that interests us.
For me, my next major upgrade will be my laptop. I have an MSI GS60 Stealth. It was the first, if you remember when Razer came out with the Blade, their first laptop, it was super thin. It was the first of its kind. This was the first competitor to that. This edition that I have was the first competitor to that. And it's been a great laptop. The battery's starting to go on it. But it's a 3-year-old laptop at this point now, I think. So I've definitely gotten my mileage out of it. And it's a 17-inch laptop, which I absolutely love.
Ooh, yeah.
But from a portability standpoint, it's not quite there because the backpacks that I carry don't quite fit it.
Right.
Unless if I carry my monster backpack. But the laptop I have my eye on is the Razer Blade Stealth, their Ultrabook, because that thing just looks sexy. And by the time I'll be able to actually do the upgrade, it'll be another year or so. So probably by the second generation of that laptop where they've worked out whatever kinks there are.
Right.
And I think that's really the big upgrade coming down the line for me that I can see today. Now, I don't typically... My last PC build was 2014.
Okay.
Christmas 2014, New Year's 2015, when I got everything on sale. And that was about between the PC and the monitor, that was about a $2,500 to $2,800 rebuild. And the time before that was 2010. So that's a 4-year, give or take, cycle on the PC build.
Right.
So it'll probably be another couple of years before I do the PC build too. Because when my next PC build will not be, it will continue to escalate it'll continue to escalate in the lack of price performance. Because it's gotten to a point now to where I just love the hardware and I just want something that has, the 10 cores and 20 threads. I want 64 or 128 gigs of memory. I want whatever the Titan will be at the time and all that ridiculousness. But that'll be at least one full hardware refresh, so CPU and GPU down the line, if not two.
Okay.
But that's all I got.
Very cool. I'm trying to see if there's a render of the thing that I'm looking at. Or if the easiest thing to do is just to go to the product page. The picture's not as detailed as I would want, but I'll just so despite the fact that I have been down talking the Razor, what I am looking at right now is so I think what my plan is to I'm gonna use my next upgrade to upgrade my Alienware Alpha, which is behind me, but unfortunately the camera angle is not such that you can see it. But the workstation, when my camera comes back on, the workstation back over my left-hand shoulder is where the Alienware Alpha sits, and I'm planning on upgrading, I think, to an Alienware 13 gaming laptop. I might go with a 15 and go with the mid-size, but I think right now I'm going to go with the 13, and I am actually going to buy the external GPU module, which will allow me. I think this comes right now. This comes with a 960M, which is what I run on the Lenovo Y50, which is what I'm broadcasting from today. I don't know if we're going to see a new NVIDIA chip, mobile chip this year. Oftentimes we do, but then it doesn't wind up in commercially available products for a few months. So I don't know if there's going to be a commercially available new NVIDIA GPU this year, which I assume would restart the numbering since they're in the 900 series right now. But regardless, I think I'm definitely strongly considering getting this external GPU module here, which I think has two PCIe 16X slots in it. And that will allow me to run with the GTX 960M when I'm on travel or on the go, but then come home and plug in this box, which, like I said, I believe will let me run will let me run in SLI if I want to. Yeah, the Alienware graphics amplifier.
I don't know if it'll let you run SLI. SLI
Okay.
requires you to have the same card, and the 960M and the 960 even aren't. Even though it's the same name, they're still not the same chip. So
right.
I don't think it would actually let you run an SLI.
But I think this thing has two PCIe 16 speed lanes in the box, and I think you can run SLI solely from the GPUs in the box.
In the box?
I think so.
I think it's just you have the lanes for the bandwidth.
Okay.
I think it only supports one physical card.
Okay.
I think. And that's one of the main reasons that I really like the idea of the Razer Blade Stealth too, right? Is the Razer's edition of that, the Core.
Right.
And the fact that the one thing that I like about the Core over the Alienware solution,
yep,
as of right now, as of this recording, the Alienware solution is still a proprietary connector.
Correct.
Which is what Dell is absolutely famous and notorious for, is proprietary connectors.
Right.
But the Core is just running off of Thunderbolt or USB 3.1 at least. USB 3.1, so you have 40 gigs worth of bandwidth, and you can run that PCIe lane over it, which is great, which means you're not locked into that particular computer or one particular laptop you can plug it into. You know, Joe did the review of that Lenovo Yoga, what was it, the 900 or 700? I forget. Right. But I'm pretty sure that had a USB. I'm pretty sure that had a USB Type-C port, which you would be able to plug the Core directly into, and bam, you have external graphics. You have like essentially an external dock. Right. Because you've got your graphics, you can set your network up on it, you've got USB 3 on it. And so now it's just a docking station like normal, except now you have an actual external grade, desktop grade graphics card a part of it. Right. Which is the primary reason why I love the idea of an external graphics unit.
You're right. And you're right. It is it's only capable of running with the one card. I don't think you can even cross-link to the card that's on your laptop.
Yeah.
It does have some extra ports, so you can hook up additional displays. You can route it has a integrated USB hub, so you can put your mouse, keyboard, external hard drive on there, and it has multiple USB 3.0 ports. So I don't know. It's like I said, I think it's a solution I like right now, just because of the tight integration, and not yet really seeing the Razer module available, easily, in high volume. So, but yeah, and yeah, so I don't know. We'll see how it goes. For the rest of the year. Yeah, I see the Titan. They'll ship you a Titan on there for $1,300.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, which if you're going to pay $950 for the laptop, if you're going to pay $1,000 for the laptop, I don't know that that's horribly that far away. I mean, if you were going to buy a really beefy high-end gaming laptop, like Acer just announced, that's a VR ready, VR capable laptop. I mean, that thing was $2,300. I mean, a Titan is certainly going to last you a very long time. There's not going to be any need for you to upgrade anytime soon. So I don't know. It's not it's in the realm of possibility, I guess.
Yeah, we're in an interesting time right now with GPUs, in that we seem to be hitting a longer time. It feels like it's been a long time since we've had anything new from NVIDIA.
Right.
And it felt like for a while we were getting basically every year and a half, but these cards have been around, this current generation, the 900 series, we're hitting on 2 years now.
Right.
And I know that HBM2 is supposed to be the next big thing from NVIDIA with Pascal, but they didn't show off. They showed off that compute unit, which was absolutely gorgeous and powerful.
Right.
But they didn't show off anything from a consumer standpoint, which leads me to believe they're not quite ready. And that's why we're still sitting here with the 900 series.
Right. And this is the unfortunate thing. It's why even if you're an NVIDIA lover, which is which kind of gets to the whole thing of why things like console wars and like nerd hatred are stupid, right? Yeah. It's if you're going to participate in the NVIDIA versus AMD kind of ridiculous conversation, and you're going to be super pro NVIDIA. The problem is NVIDIA is only it's at its best when there is an AMD.
Yeah,
and I think what we're unfortunately seeing is an AMD that's fallen off, and isn't as competitive in some of these spaces, and so NVIDIA can kind of afford to not push its technology, at least in the desktop and laptop space, forward as hard as it should. It is interesting that AMD has is the vendor of choice for both of the primary gaming consoles right now. And I wonder, it kind of surprised me. I mean, that has to put some financial pressure on NVIDIA, because those are huge contracts.
They're giving those things away at cost. Yeah. And I would have thought the same thing, but if you look, AMD is still hurting.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only reason, and the thing that the only reason that I think AMD got that contract is because they've been in the APU market for a while now.
Right.
Yep. Around 4 or 5 years. Yep. And they've gotten pretty good. I mean, the APUs are pretty good little processors.
Oh yeah,
for what they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I really think that that's the only reason that they got them, is because they've been in the market. They know how to work the architectures well.
Yep.
And so NVIDIA doesn't have anything comparable to offer except for the Tegra, but that's not really an APU. It's more of a GPU trying to work as an APU. And then on Intel side, they've always been way behind on the graphics side of things. So right. AMD is the only clear choice, and yet AMD still hurting. And it's funny you bring up how NVIDIA is always at its best when there's AMD. AMD's launched the Fury X, and the Nano with HBM, and a 980 Ti overclocked which is using an older architecture, which is using an older memory, substrate and everything, is still just as capable as those cards.
Yeah.
And so it just goes to show that NVIDIA, in a lot of ways, really was on top of their game and has stayed that way, which is probably total guess and speculation here. That's probably why they're waiting to get Pascal right, is to make sure that when they do it, there's reason for it, and it'll be another situation where, okay, we are once again clearly the leader here, try to catch up, which I don't see AMD being able to do at this point.
Right. What it feels like is the merger with ATI, really kind of helped both sides of that deal along for a limited period of time. It feels like the merger gave them an amount of propellant that had a quantifiable horizon to it, and it feels like they've hit that horizon, and now there's just no more. There's just nothing else to be gained from that initial merger and relationship that gives them any kind of an advantage, which is unfortunate.
It is.
So let's go on and go to news. That'll be an interesting time when. So do you think? And I didn't follow. Do you think are you looking at upgrading to the Razer this year?
No, it'll probably be the second generation of the laptop. Okay. If they launch a second generation of the laptop, I'll be surprised. I think it'll be next year that they do that.
Yeah, probably CES, you think?
Probably about that time, yeah. That's probably when I'll be able to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you consider responsibilities and having another baby and all of the money that entails, that's it puts a space between the wants and the needs. Right.
No, I was just asking because that'll be an interesting time if I've got the Alienware with the breakout box and you've got the Razer with the breakout box. It'll be
fun to compare. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. All right, man. Let's go ahead and trundle on over to tech news for the week. So, number one.
What?
Let's talk about Gearbox Software shared out some details on Borderlands 3. So this occurred at PAX East, which went down this week. All sorts of neat little tidbits in here. There's talk of characters coming over from Tales from the Borderlands, nice. The story-based kind of RPG-ish kind of game.
The Telltale games. Yep.
There's now I just dumped like everything that I remembered about this article for some reason. Right now there's no. I don't think there's any kind of projected release date on this. They're not rushing. They say they're not even certain that they're going to call it Borderlands 3. Mm-hmm. They are working on it. And again, this is of course Gearbox Studios, which has gone from being not only a developer but also to being a publisher of some pretty kind of fan favorite games, right? So they got a hold of the Homeworld IP and proved to be the savior of many of us PC gamers who loved the Homeworld franchise and published that last year as the Homeworld Remastered Collection. And now I get all sorts of email from them because I had to sign up for a Gearbox account to play Homeworld multiplayer. So, yet another online gaming service to register to. Probably the most interesting thing is, the Battleborn art director is on board the development team for Borderlands 3 or whatever it will be called. And there's mention that there's going to be, potential, not spoilers, but teasers, in Battleborn with references to Borderlands and maybe the next Borderlands. And in addition to that, Mikey Newman, who was the story writer for Borderlands, will also be on board. And what I like about his resume is that he was also responsible for doing some of the writing in the Brothers in Arms series, which is one of my favorite franchises in PC gaming. So are you a player of the Borderlands franchise at Arcon?
I have them, and they're fun to just hop in for an hour here or there. Never really gotten deep into any of the games, but I do enjoy the art style.
Yeah, it's the only cell shaded game that I've ever been interested in.
Yeah,
but we talked about Borderlands a little on this week's episode of Controllers and Remotes, the show I do with Jonathan Reyes and Peter Morrow, and all of us, kind of chimed in on how Borderlands is just this kind of nostalgic, quirky kind of favorite.
Yeah, and it's kind of that. It's one of those games that it kind of is reminiscent of Half-Life for me, in that you can just kind of turn off mentally and just go to town and have fun. Right. And that, like you said, Half-Life had that quirkiness with its storyline, and I'm talking the original Half-Life. It had that quirkiness too, which was great. And this kind of has a similar feel to it for me.
Right.
And that's why when I turn it on, I feel good.
Right. And great gun porn.
Yes, absolutely.
So next story up is this controversy over USB-C. So this caught my eye because I'm currently kind of living through some of this because my Nexus 6P is a USB-C device, and it causes some logistics problems, right? I mean, I have two, I have three USB-C cables total. One of those is a USB-C Lightning cable for my MacBook One, so it doesn't really do me a lot of good for the Nexus 6P. But the Nexus 6P came with like this little stub cable that's maybe 7 or 8 inches long, and then it has the full length cable to use with the charger. So if I leave the charger at home with the full length cable and get in the car and the 6P is not charged very well, then I have this little stubby cable, which if I have a car charger in the car that'll take a direct USB, a full size USB connection to send to USB-C, that it's fine. But then I have to, the length is so short that I have to put the phone like in the cup holder that's directly underneath the charging port. So it's just I need to get a couple like good quality USB-C like long cables. And that's the problem with USB-C today. And as this article on Tech Times indicates, Google engineer Benson Leong kind of called out the HTC 10 and the LG G5 for not being compliant with the USB-C spec. And this is kind of funny because an analog to this is Apple going after Samsung when they are pissed at Google for Android, right? Mm-hmm. Because the real problem isn't necessarily with LG with what LG did or HTC did. It's a problem. It's a problem derived from their use of the Qualcomm quick charging spec, which is a separate spec from the USB-C. And the problem is that the Qualcomm quick charging spec allows manufacturers to drive the voltage above 5 volts, and the USB-C spec calls for no more than 5 volts. So it's almost like, there's nothing non-compliant with the cable, but the quick charging spec allows you to rig your wall wart or the electrical component with the windings to drive the voltage. They allow that to be engineered such that it drives the recharging voltage over 5 volts. And that's why I think Qualcomm feels like it's being called out and had the need to, respond with its own press release.
I'm sure.
which basically says, that, hey, quick charge is designed to be compliant with the spec, but it's independent of the connector. So if the manufacturer makes a connector that drives it over 5 volts, that's not our problem.
Yeah.
So the problem that does come here is I think if that voltage is driven too high, and if the USB-C cable isn't compliant, so if you go and buy like third-party cables and they're crappy USB-C cables, you can burn up the device you're trying to charge.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah. So now, have you gotten into the USB-C era, Kyle?
No, I'm still stuck on either Lightning or USB-B.
Okay.
And the micro USB specifically,
Okay.
which is the bane of my existence, but I have more cables than I know what to do with. It's the most interesting conundrum to be in. Yeah, I haven't caught up that far in the tech that I have that has to have a USB Type-C connection. It's been interesting to watch it all. You know, that's one of the things that happens when we have a new specification on a port like this, because there's a lot going on here, because not only are we increasing bandwidth and capabilities of the port and everything like that, but we're also changing the form factor as well. So when we went from USB A to USB B, that wasn't a big deal because all we were really changing was the shape, and we made it easier and all that fun stuff, which is great. And then with USB Type B, we got all the different subvariant shapes, which was fine, but we're not changing the speed or the specification of what can be done over it. With USB-C, we changed both at the same time, and to complicate it, Qualcomm had, how long has Quick Charge been around? Maybe a year and a half?
I want to say this is the second generation of Quick Charge phones.
Yeah, so it hasn't been out that long. So now we're compounding the complication even further, because we have a new form factor and specification for USB Type-C, and we're trying to integrate a new third-party specification or certification, whatever it is, for the Quick Charge. We're just compounding issues here, and I think that it's getting crazy. And then you have Vincent Lang in here saying, hey guys, y'all are screwing this up. Hey guys, y'all are screwing this up. Hey guys, this isn't right. And he seems to be on a crusade to get USB Type-C right. And I don't know what his and I haven't looked into this gentleman at all, and I don't know what his connection is to USB Type-C. But he's been on a crusade of just calling people out on compliance or not with USB Type-C, which is good, because we now have someone who's pretty well qualified to test these things, to tell us what's viable, what's not, what's legit, and what's not. But he's also stirring the pot.
Right, and I think, you know, this is I don't think this is too far off the norm for Google. You know, they do the same thing kind of in the security space, where they have their own security research team to look at vulnerabilities in browsers and operating systems, because they have dependencies on those, or they make those. You know, and they want to note products that that aren't towing the line, and help everybody out by, you know, exposing vulnerabilities if the companies won't fix them themselves. You know, Google uses USB-C. I believe they use it. I'm pretty sure they use it in their Pixel C.
That they do, yeah.
And like I mentioned, they use it on the Nexus 6P. So they want people to get it right, and they don't want their customers to be burned by, you know, crappy USB-C power supplies and cables.
And it's just one of the things that happens when you have a brand new, you know, standard,
right,
is that you have the people who create the cheap stuff, the cheap cables, just try to jump in there, and they're going to muddy the water in terms of quality. And then you have everybody else trying to get it right, but it takes longer. And so I think we're just in that fun conundrum of just that switch that takes place and is inevitable.
Right. I mean, we went through the same thing with lightning cables, right?
Yeah. Which those still haven't really, if it wasn't for the fact that, you know, if it wasn't for the fact that Apple basically forces you to make changes,
right,
there would be no reason to upgrade standards.
right. You know, I think most of all, my main problem with this is, you know, so here, you know, here's a spec that was created USB-C with a power specification. Here comes Qualcomm, who, you know, had the quick charging spec beforehand, because there was a quick charging spec that was just compliant with micro USB.
Yep.
And they upgraded their quick charging spec to include compatibility with USB-C. where manufacturers are allowed to overdrive the voltage, I guess in an effort to charge the phone faster. Here's my big problem. Stop being lazy and make the batteries last longer. This notion of quick charging as a workaround to poor battery life, to me, is not satisfactory.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't want to have to carry my power supply. Now, in the past, I didn't mind carrying my power supply, but I think the issue, at least that I'm getting exposed to today, since I've started using a lot of wearables, is the fact that the phone battery life might be okay by itself, but in this day where many, many people are using fitness bands and doing wearables, battery life takes a significant hit. I think it's bugging users, and I think quick charging is a workaround to get around that. And I'm like, recognize that there's now a need for there to be a margin of power that accommodates maintaining a link with a wearable device during the day, maybe 2, and work on improving battery life. And what frustrates me is, it's almost difficult for me to say, I feel like Apple is the only company that has universally focused on new designs and new technology that enable better battery life. It's like all the other manufacturers are just focused on means of incorporating larger and larger batteries. And I'm like, I don't want a larger, potentially explosive device in my pocket, right? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, it's just kind of frustrating me. And we're going to talk.
We might be running into the limitations of the lithium-ion battery as it is today, though.
That's
and
possible.
That might be why that quick charge is that next workaround, is because from a technology standpoint, from a battery technology standpoint, it feels like we're kind of hitting a wall in terms of we've done everything we can. The only thing to do is make it bigger. We can optimize the platform only so much. And I think, to be fair, one of the reasons why Apple has been able to make marginal improvements device over device, year over year, is because of their complete control from start to finish, hardware to software to battery. And because of that complete control, they only know their stuff better and better and more intimately. And so they can find all the different little nooks and crannies where they can tweak towards power savings to ink out that extra, 5% of battery life from last year to this year on the new MacBook, right?
Right. Yeah.
Apple released the refresh of a MacBook with Intel Skylake. Intel Skylake is inherently more energy efficient, and which allows them to basically say, oh yeah, with this one you have 5% more battery life.
Right.
It might be a result of a better battery. It might be a result of better energy efficiency in the processing technology, but because it's all in the same ecosystem, it just makes Apple look better. Whereas with Google, everything is so diverse. There is no complete control from manufacturer to consumer, that you have no other option, in my opinion. If you're Qualcomm, they're smart for saying, hey, we can license this technology to you and we can get our piece of the pie because y'all are so diverse, which diversity is always a good thing, but it does come with its problems that we're seeing here with, battery life not being consistent across devices and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's some sympathy in there that I hold as well. But the only edge cases where it's not, I'm not in 100% accordance with that perspective is Motorola has figured something out that enables them to make crazy battery life for devices.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just because they spent, $1 million more in R&D on it or what, but they figured it out. So it's frustrating to not understand why everybody else can't. But then the other thing is, then even with Motorola, it skips generations. So they do great battery life on the Motorola Droid Turbo. And they put that same technology, you would think, and an even larger battery in the Droid Turbo 2, which has a 3,450 milliamp hour battery. But my experience with the Droid Turbo 2 was horrible for battery life, So, and we ran an article this week on the Moto X Pure Edition, which recently dropped in price, and word on that device is that battery life isn't that great either. So hopefully they'll figure something out. But in the meantime, we'll all be caught up in Qualcomm and their USB-C compatible quick charging technology.
Yay.
So next story up is lost my mouse for some reason.
Speaking of Apple.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of company to consumer control,
is Apple requiring all new watch apps to be native by June. Now, this doesn't particularly bother me. Apple has, had put the capability for native watch apps in their operating system. I think late last year.
that sounds right.
Yeah. So this is shades of when they made the jump to native apps on the original iPhone, right? If people often forget that the iPhone originally shipped with a capability only for web apps, and then made native apps feasible, and then really opened up the App Store. They're kind of doing the same thing here, so that processing can take place on the watch, and so that everything is not being processed on the phone and then just being shipped to the watch for display. Again, I don't have a problem with it. I think developers have had some opportunity to convert or to raise a stink if they felt it wasn't enough time. Now, you're an Apple user. Do you also use the Apple Watch, or have you had a chance to just demo it?
No, I don't. I've got a handful of friends who have them and absolutely love them. I just, I don't like the square face. Is the simple fact. If I'm gonna have a square face, I don't want it to be the Apple Watch. I don't like how roundedness, like it's all roundy and bubbly, and I don't like that.
Right.
And that's been, it's funny. Apple has always been known for their aesthetics, and this is one case where I cannot stand the aesthetic of a device that they put out. In fact, I think you've got coming up in later on talking about the LG Watch Urbane. Like, I love the look of that device. Yeah. It looks like a classic watch and looks so classy. And this just looks like another gadget, and I don't want something on my wrist to look like that. Okay. So I have avoided it like the plague.
Okay. Yeah. It'll be interesting. And when we do show and tell, I'll bring up the LG Watch Urbane and kind of hopefully maybe be able to show a couple of apps that run natively on the watch. I'm all for it. It's tough though. I kind of have to make use cases to force myself to use watch apps on my Android Wear devices. I'm still pretty poor about figuring out those use cases on Tizen for my Gear watches. But they're definitely I would say Android Wear. So I've used Android Wear, Tizen, and the Microsoft Band. Which has its own operating system. I would say that the most, the most utilitarian of those three has been the Android Wear apps available on the LG Watch Urbane and other watches that I've used. So next story up is Google and Microsoft make nice. So basically, both companies have submitted statements to the Department of Justice, I guess, that they will stop trying to resolve all of their differences in court, that they in particular will work towards coming to settlements on Microsoft's taking umbrage to what it perceives as the use of some of its technologies in Android. I reckon that Microsoft is going to continue to get paid a small amount for every Android device that is sold. But those are the things they're going to work on. My big thing is I have been personally impacted by, Google not playing ball with Microsoft for, getting access to Google Calendar. That went on for a while. Google Voice was kind of pulled in, and its API was restricted for access, and that impacted my use when I was on Windows phones. On Windows 10, calendar integration. I'm sorry, a Windows 8 calendar integration was horrible with Google Calendar. There was a time I actually stopped using Google Calendar and went to using the Outlook.com calendar because it proved to be actually more compatible across my mobile devices than Google Calendar was. Wow. So Windows 10 seems to correct that. The only problem now is there's bugs, and I frequently see wonkiness when I access my calendars via the Windows 10 calendar. But and then YouTube has also proven to be a problem, right? So I'm hoping that a lot of this goes away. I guess what I found also interesting in this article was the suggestion that that the relationship between Sundar Pichai and Satya Nadella, who, as far as I understand, are both of Indian ethnicity, that they get along better with Steve Ballmer and Eric Schmidt,
Wouldn't surprise me.
Right, which kind of reminds me of a line in a Missy Elliott song that talks about people of different races, people of the same ethnicity, as opposed to African Americans, having better things to do than talk about who's better or throwing shade at each other, and just talk about how to work together to make more paper. This is
it's true. It's true.
So this is a thing where it looks like perhaps two gentlemen of Indian ethnicity have better things to do than snipe at each other, like Eric Schmidt and Steve Ballmer maybe used to do, and are just looking forward to working together. And I think that makes sense, right? Because
yes,
Google and Microsoft compete, but Microsoft doesn't need to do the things that Google does best.
Exactly.
And the same is true in reverse. So what are your thoughts on this, Kyle?
I think it's good. I think they finally realized that it was just dumb and would get nowhere and cost them way too much money for too little in return. And I think it's good because really and truly, they can complement each other extremely well if they really work towards it. And they can be very, my use case, I use Windows 10 as my operating system, and I've always been on Windows, but ever since I experienced Chrome from Google for the first time, I've been a Google Chrome user ever since. Even with all of its, of course, I always have more memory than I need. So even with all of its memory issues and everything like that, I've been integrated in Google's web ecosystem from like an apps and productivity standpoint with Chrome, Gmail, and so on. It makes sense for them to find ways to work together because they can only complement each other. Even on the phone standpoint, Microsoft with the Nokia line or the Lumia line, however they're naming it now, with Android will be, if they can get their act together on their phone, it could be a beautiful thing.
Right.
And also from a slight tangent, but sort of not. So on the enterprise side, Microsoft's been doing some really interesting things with server and some really interesting things with specifically in relating to making Windows Server more Unix-like and more Linux-like, and bringing in the things from Linux and Unix that people absolutely love, like containerization and some of the things like that, and implementing that into Windows Server. Now, Android is a Linux distribution, essentially. Right. So it would make sense for Microsoft to start to play ball with Google as well from that perspective, thinking from the perspective of everything enterprise trickles down to consumer. So if we're getting Linux and Unix integration and Linux and Unix features on server, getting those similar features into consumer, which the ultimate consumer product is the phone, I feel like it just makes sense. And I don't know why particularly, I don't have any specifics as to why, but just seeing what they're doing on the enterprise side, just from what I have to pay attention to with work, there's something about this, and I don't know where they're going with it, but it makes complete sense. And I hope in 3 to 5 years time, I think it'll take 3 to 5 years time before we see any fruits of this agreement.
Right.
But if we do, I think they're going to be really cool fruits, and I think they're going to be really awesome.
Cool. Very cool. So last news story before we go over to show and tell is this story from Android and Me. Acer Liquid Zest Plus, the soapy named phone, is now official with a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. So there was a press event last week on April 21st. Interesting, because that's the day that lots of tech companies release their quarterly earnings report. So Acer kind of swooped in to steal the limelight and did a big press event. Most of what they presented were things in the PC space, but they did present this one mobile device, which has a 5.5-inch screen, 13 megapixel rear-facing camera, tri-focus, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And the big thing was a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. So my takeaways from this are a few things. Number one, stop giving me low megapixel cameras with some type of branded camera technology that supposedly makes it better, because that's not
Just
worked out.
not true.
Yeah, I mean, I know megapixels aren't everything, but all this fancy marketing stuff around camera capabilities, like HTC tried it, just doesn't prove out. The laser rangefinder on the LG G series of phones helps. Optic stabilization helps. Having just a really great sensor helps. But all these other things, I don't buy it.
I'm with you.
I'm all down with a 5.5-inch phone. My problem with Acer is they have never successfully launched a phone that's gained any traction in the United States. When I see their press renders of these phones, they look good. This design is very reminiscent to me of the Asus Zenfone 2 design, which was a phone that I owned and I really liked. But I just don't know that Acer is going to bring this to market with sufficient availability for somebody in the U.S. to get a hold of one. It's remarkable to me that the projection that it's going to come in at a $250 price point. So now that's fine. It needs to be a flagship, right? It can't have a Snapdragon 600 series processor in it, or anything that takes it out of flagship contention. It needs to be a power device, because I don't need a 5,000 milliamp battery in a mid-grade phone. I don't know. What do you say?
I mean, really, when I think about it, if it's going to be a mid-grade phone with a 5,000 milliamp battery and it come in at $250, I think that's a trade-off that I would be willing to take. Okay. Because for me, my phone is a handful of things, one of which is not a gaming device.
Okay.
I know a lot of people play games on their phones, and that's really where the horsepower comes in play, I think. Right. As long as the screen looks good and I can consume media fine and I can make my calls, email, and text messages. I mean, I don't even browse the internet that much on my phone. I just don't like browsing the internet on a screen that's small.
Right.
So for someone like me, I would totally make that trade-off, especially $250. I mean, that's quite a trade-off, but that's quite a deal too.
Yeah. Do you think that puts it in spare phone category, or do you?
Certainly would put it there.
Okay.
Do you see but it would also be a daily. I mean, if I had to get rid of my iPhone and this was available, it would be a serious contender because it's $250. I mean, an iPhone on contract is still $250, $300. Right. If you're buying it flat out, it's a good an iPhone worth its weight is going to be $800. So it's one of those things. I think it's interesting. The phones that are hitting that $200 to $300 price point are really stepping it up in quality and really stepping up their game and what they're packing in. And you can always see where the trade-offs are. So like the camera in this, for example, if it's a $250 phone, that's a trade-off that makes sense. It'll be good, but not great, probably. The battery, it'll be great, but the processor itself may not be. And so the thing that intrigues me about this price point on phones is those trade-offs and how it's so niche on what's good or great and stuff. And I think the fact that Acer has, it could be a flagship grade phone because they probably have the scale available to produce it that cheap. And if it's popular on an international level, that'll help it keep the price down too.
Yeah, and that is definitely Acer's shtick, is bringing powerful devices to market at reduced prices.
That they do.
Yeah, I'm guessing one of those trade-offs will be wireless charging.
Probably.
Which is fine.
I don't know. Do you use wireless charging?
I do, and I think because I've heard some of the rest of the media comment on It's an acceptable trade-off, and it's not needed. Nobody uses it. It's, the battery life, and they talk about, I've heard people talk about it with reference to the iPhone. The iPhone doesn't need it because it's got a great battery life and blah blah blah. And I'm like, it's not about battery life. It's about universal compatibility and convenience. Meaning we live in a world now where there's a number of people who their mobile kit is made up of devices from different manufacturers, right? Lots of people use an iPhone with an Android tablet or a Windows tablet, or some other mix match, or have an iPhone from work, and use an Android phone for their personal, and have a need to have both of those phones with them. So the point of wireless charging is that it's no cables. You come home, you sit in your computer room, you sit down to watch TV, whatever. I don't need to have wall warts and lightning cables and micro USB cables on every floor in my house, right? If my devices use wireless charging, I put down one wireless charging pad, preferably that uses the Qi wireless technology, and anybody, not just me, but anybody who's in my home who needs to charge their phone just puts it on the pad. Like one of the things I hate is when people come to visit, especially when I have like large numbers of like my wife's family in town, everybody's got to break out a stinking phone charger, right? And my main floor looks like a Verizon shop, right? With everybody's phone plugged in all over the place. Some people have wall chargers that like don't allow something to be plugged into the other electrical. It's just crazy. And I'm like, why are all these phones not on a single charging standard so I can just put, the manufacturers aren't going to get to a point where they all use the same connector, and the same type of wall plug, right? So if they could get to the point where they all use the same wireless charging standard, that makes life easier for everybody. So I'm sorry, all these guys, and I'm not going to call them out by name, but there are lots of tech podcasts, some of them that are oriented specifically around Apple products, who say that wireless charging isn't needed on iOS devices. That's not the case. They need it so that there is at least one small part of them that is the same as Android devices, and Android devices need to get more on board too. There was a drift towards wireless charging, and now lots of powerful devices are drifting away. In my mind, all of the flagships need to have wireless charging on the Qi charging standard. And I mean, and not just in your house, right? I mean, how awesome would it be?
Charging a little slower than cable?
I think so, but I guess what I found in my use with wireless charging around the house is when I have a wireless charging pillow next to me, there aren't as many situations where a lot of times there are situations where I take my device off a charger because of something I need to do with the device. But when it's on a wireless charging pillow, I just come home and I put it on the pillow, and it goes. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be an awesome world if, and when I talk about these things being available in the public space, yes, wireless charging may be slower than cable, but lots of times you stop at an airport and there's not an outlet available. They're limited. People are using them. I mean, it would just be wonderful if in airports you went and every gate just had a wireless Qi charging table bench that you just walked up to and sat your phone down on. And maybe you had to stand around it, but I mean that the number of phones that can go on that table well exceeds the number of phones that can get plugged into like two port outlets scattered around the airport.
Which is why I always carry one of those Belkin 3-port little surge protectors that has the two USB and the 3 ports.
Yep.
Yeah, those things are amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Let's quickly go through. Show and tell. So I will.
Let me find.
You start.
Hang on.
Yep.
So one thing we didn't exactly talk about, but has happened since our last episode, was people started getting their hands on their VR headsets.
Yes. Yeah.
One person I follow on YouTube in particular, Mike B, aka Phony, we just dropped like this link to this playlist for people if they want into. Here, I'll drop it in Group Me so you can pop it up. One fellow that I follow on YouTube, Mike B, he got his hands on a Rift for a week, and because his buddy just picked one up off of Craigslist, I think, just on a whim of all. It must be nice to be able to pick up a VR headset on a whim. But he picked one up and then was immediately going out of town. So Mike B was like, what are you doing with that? And he used that entire week and a half that he was out of town. And he's been uploading content pretty regularly about the VR experience. And it's been interesting. I wonder if he has his rant on here too. No, I need to get that. He has a really good rant about VR from a streamer / content creator perspective. That's really good that I had not considered. And it comes back to the idea of different standards and there not being a specific standard across games or platforms in terms of recording capabilities. And so he's got a really good rant about that. But that VR list is it's literally him playing games in Rift. And so if you want to get an idea of what it'll be like to watch people stream content with Rift or an HTC Vive or the OS VR whenever that comes out, or the PlayStation VR whenever that comes out, this is it right here. And it's surprisingly enjoyable because the VR space. There's one game where it's a horror game, and it is absolutely a blast to watch because you're feeling the same tension as him because you only see what he sees, and in this case it's cropped even more because you can't get the full view in a standard 16:9 aspect ratio, and like you feel his tension on a lesser degree, but it's there. And when things freak him out, you freak out too, and you jump too, and it's yes, that one right there. It's great. And be careful because there is language. So depending on your views on language, take that with a grain of salt.
I'm gonna try and stream this just for a split second. I don't know if this is gonna work.
It might.
Is the sound coming through?
No sound.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because all he's doing is talking right now. But like that's what he sees. That's what he sees in the headset. Now in the headset he sees more vertically, and he tells you in the start of the video. But that's the game, right? And so it's been actually really enjoyable watching VR content because it's not like standard 2D content. It's weird. It's something that you have to watch a couple of videos to figure out if you enjoy watching it or not. But I definitely enjoyed it, and so I figured since the Vive and the Rift are starting to ship now, that was a good throw in there for stuff to show off this week. And I've enjoyed his content for a long time. But that's neither here nor there. But it's fun.
Yeah.
VR head. It is real.
So
but that's the first thing I've got.
Yeah. Is sound coming through now? Or no?
There? No.
Nope. Okay. Well,
it's all good.
I mean, there it is.
Yeah. And hopefully when this goes live, we'll get links in the show notes.
Yeah. Eventually, I'll figure out how to do that, how to broadcast.
Ethan, you there?
Yep.
What is up?
I've got a few things to show off. So I can turn my camera on 1 second.
Okay. Well, let's get through Kyle's first. So, Kyle, did you have anything else you needed to say?
I do have. This is from a technology standpoint. This technology is ancient by today's terms, but it is print, and I have been reading The Death of Captain America as a book, and it has just been a phenomenal read. I started reading it early last week, and I don't know if you can see I'm already about a third of the way or almost halfway through this book. It's just a great read. And with Civil War coming up, I've been reading all of the Civil War comics and tie-ins, and so that's just a tangent. The PS4K, Project Neo.
Yeah.
That's something that's been talked about lately, so it'll be interesting to see if the rumors are actually true. A lot of time, that I've noticed, if the rumors about something like that are not true, it's just kind of like hot water in the frying pan. It's just a flash, and it's there one day and gone the next. But this seems to be getting some heavy circulation from all the sites, and so it's starting to look more and more like the PS4K is going to be an actual thing. I'll be interested to see what it actually turns out being, if the rumor mill is right or not, in this whole idea of having to have two different game graphics settings for developers on the PS4 now.
Yep.
That'll be fun to see play out, because in the PC space we've had different graphics settings all our lives.
Right.
And now console people are gonna, at least PS4 people are gonna start to experience it.
Right.
And it would make sense for them to refresh the console with higher powered architecture and hardware inside, with them trying to bring the VR to it. So there's that. I already brought up the MacBook Air refresh. They brought Skylake into it, which is great. And then the other last piece of tech that I've been into this last couple of weeks is, if you remember episode 1, I talked about trying to figure out a storage solution and rebuilding my NAS. Finally got that done. Rebuilding the NAS is quite fun. Put FreeNAS on it. And we're back to Storage Central, which is just having just storage upon storage is always just it makes me feel good inside.
Right.
Makes me feel good inside. So mine's been a smorgasbord, and that wraps me up.
Cool, very cool. So Ethan, what did you have for show and tell / tech you're into?
So right now, some of the things I'm into is this one is very new. Like, it's a really, really new thing, and there's not a huge amount of info on it right now, but there's still some projects going on. It's check out the RTL SDR if you want to learn more about it, but it's a software-defined radio. So what software-defined radio is so I have my little antenna here, I have this, which it plugs into a USB port, and I can use this to hook it up. I can plug this in to a computer. It works best with Linux, and when you use one of the softwares, I recommend GQRX for Linux users or Mac users, and SDR Sharp for Windows users. It is harder to get started on Windows, though, because you have to install some drivers. But the thing is, with SDR, you can connect to, you can just monitor any thing on the radio spectrum. It depends on your it depends on the range the antenna you're using has. Mm-hmm. But what you can do with it, you can basically you can create little listening stations for yourself. So you could listen to the radio, but that's not all you can do. You can also do things like you can listen to certain ham radio things. And GQRX actually comes with its own decoder for a certain station. I can't remember what the station's called, but it's basically a ham radio messaging system, and it's where you can, I think it's like 144.35 on the radio spectrum in megahertz. But you can listen to that, and it will decode the messages for you, because it's sending little packets on that radio station.
That's cool.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had some exposure to software-defined radio because they were being used in certain other applications outside of their consumer availability. So, my exposure to them just, is represented by the ability to reduce your hardware footprint and to not necessarily have to have hardware, with components inside that are specifically made to accommodate specific frequencies, right? You can define those frequencies a little bit more on the fly. And it's very analogous to this. In fact, I'd call it a parallel to this technical effort to deploy and architect software-defined networks as well.
Mm-hmm.
So SDN and SDR kind of go, or they're not necessarily go hand in hand, but definitely are analogous as far as bringing in, and in some places can be used in conjunction to bring in, OTA, TCP/IP signals into and out of hard-wired networks. So yeah, it's pretty powerful technology.
Yeah,
so
that's pretty cool.
So what were the other things you were going to talk about, Ethan?
So I think another one is this microphone. I got this microphone. It's a Blue Nessie. It works fantastic. Like, seriously, I got it for like $70 off like Amazon. They had a sale for it, and it's, by that standard, it's cheap and it works great. Like, I really like it so far. Check out Blue Mics, I think, is just kind of what I had to say for that. And then next thing is Linux distros. I've been into Linux for a long time recently. Like, recently for maybe like a year or so, I've been into Linux and using Linux on like all my systems. And it's as close to a perfect OS as I can get right now, actually.
What are you using right now? What distro?
I use Arch. Well, a version of... I
had a feeling.
Yeah, I use Apricity. It's an installed version of Arch. I like it because it comes with a modified like GNOME shell and everything, and works nice on laptops and stuff.
Well, in Arch you can kind of build your own too, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Arch
seems to be the hot one right now.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's sort of like it's like a little bit easier than Gentoo apparently, and it's modifiable like Gentoo, so that's nice.
Cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've dabbled in Linux. I think you kind of have to, if you're a geek, you kind of owe it to yourself to at least get through it as a learning experience.
Yes.
I struggled a little bit through Linux trying to get itself across multiple different form factors. Right? Linux was one thing when you just had to worry about the desktop. Then it kind of had to tilt itself a little bit as it got to laptops. But then, when you started getting into netbooks and other things like this, it experienced, some more challenges. So I lived through the netbook phase where Ubuntu was trying to have a netbook specific distro that I found to be very difficult because you would frequently get like control paddles that would like not scale properly on the screen or might be off screen, and then you couldn't get them back on screen. So that kind of it.
Oh yeah, Linux scaling issues. That's been like my main issue when using all of Linux. It's like I have a 1920 1080 monitor, like completely standard,
Right?
and I run KDE. Nothing scales correctly. I just reinstall XFCE.
Oh, that's...
And yeah, I don't know what the issue is. I've tried messing around with like the DPI and all that, but could never really figure out what solved that.
I feel bad for you, Agasicles, having to actually go through the netbook phase. I was fortunate enough to skip it because I've always been the kind of person that I never really liked a laptop, but I had one because I needed it. And by the time I really started liking laptops, which was about 4 or 5 years ago, the netbook was the dodo bird by then, and so I just feel bad for anybody who had to go through that phase.
So you skipped and arrived right at the Ultrabook, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was all part of that kind of Windows finding itself on different form factors, right? And people maligned it at the time, but I loved ultra mobile PCs, which was kind of part of that mix as well. And obviously, UMPCs is what got us to the availability of tablet form factors. So, yeah, no, that's cool. That is awesome. I was trying to find the Linux distro. The big Linux, the thing that I've struggled with on Linux too is finding one that is tilted towards multimedia, because that's really what I need to be able to do if I'm going to use Linux regularly.
You mean like audio editing and video editing?
Audio and video editing, yeah.
Check out Ubuntu Studio. I think it might be a dead distro by now, but I think they still have like the site up and stuff. I don't know if it's being worked on much anymore though.
Right. And I heard you could build an Arch distro that would help out, but I never got around to trying that.
Arch is great, but it's hard to install. Like I haven't successfully installed Arch yet. I've installed like the system, but then I had to go and do the whole grub partitioning, like assign that to grub and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably the thing I know that the thing that I normally like best is CentOS. Or CentOS.
I haven't tried CentOS yet.
Yeah, it's a more enterprise kind of business oriented.
I was going to say CentOS is basically Red Hat for consumer.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's very cool, man. Very awesome. So for me, for show and tell, and just stuff I've been into. So this week, while editing our Lawbreakers coverage, and you mentioned it in group meet chat, Kyle, as we've been talking about upping the video editing quality on the site, is a Windows Movie Maker, which seems to be the Vista injected app that will never die. Or I guess Windows Movie Maker, was actually first available in Windows XP.
Probably, yeah.
But I've been using it since it became available in XP. I've had to go back out and get it since it kind of got left behind. It used to be just part of your Windows distro, or else it was that Windows would always make you install the Windows Live Essentials, and now it doesn't. But yeah, it's a great basic video editor. Doesn't look as pretty as iMovie. Doesn't have all of iMovie's capabilities, but when you need to just get stuff done, grunt work wise, for video editing, it's great. Lets you pull stuff in, overlay. The one thing I couldn't figure out how to do in it this week was I couldn't figure out how to overlay video on top of video. There's a way to do it, but it's a really kludgy workaround, and I didn't have the time for it. But I also had occasion to use QuickTime on OS X, which is now more than just an app that you use in OS X to play movie trailers. So I actually used it to capture the video interview with Cliff Blazinski and Arjan Broussais when I was at Boss Key Studios, and then exported it for video editing by our own Lance John. So that was pretty interesting also. This week I've also been using. Another thing I was exposed to at Boss Key was the use of Shadowplay. So I am going to be using Shadowplay. All my gaming PCs are run by NVIDIA GPUs, so Shadowplay is available on all of them. The way I'm going to do it is during the week when my time is more compressed during the working week, I am just going to do game capture with Shadowplay.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's easy and it's efficient.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're into streaming or video capture, you definitely need to check it. Again, I'm coming at it from a video game capture perspective. I'm not sure how good it is for streaming.
I hear it's more like lightweight in terms of like performance. It doesn't kill your performance like some do.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's that it's lightweight. I still believe that something is telling me that what NVIDIA is doing is leveraging CUDA on the GPUs.
Yeah, that's exactly what it does.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it's basically just using the unused processing power of your GPUs to do that work instead of offloading it to the CPU.
Yeah.
But OBS and XSplit both allow for the same thing. So I don't know. I don't. The thing with Shadow Play is that if you just want to get up and running on a very basic level with a webcam and your game capture, great. If you want to have the fancy overlays and all that fun stuff, unfortunately, you're going to have to go to an OBS or an XSplit in order to accomplish that.
Right. Yeah. And all those things can be added in post processing too. And I find, I originally started trying streaming with OBS and XSplit, and I just found them incredibly unreliable and difficult to mirror configurations across multiple PCs. I would get it wired on one PC, but if I went and played on another, then it was a pain. So I went to a hardware-based solution with the Elgato HD60.
Yeah.
And to overcome performance hits, I actually typically offload my game capture to a separate PC. So, which I think is the best solution. But getting all that rigged and set up it takes time. So, especially because I'm constantly configuring mine and taking it down and using different equipment. So like I said, I'm going to use Shadowplay during the week, and then use my HPC Slimline Desktop 410 in conjunction with my Elgato HD60 on weekends. And then I'm also finally getting around to, and I've owned, this is my third MacBook that I've owned with the MacBook One. I had way back in the day in like 2007, 2008, I had the hard plastic MacBook and a MacBook Pro, and I never ran Time Machine on those things. But I've recently, in the last year, I've gotten more religious about taking system images of my PC so I can restore them should anything happen. My solution for that is typically a Cronus True Image, but I finally went ahead and allocated a portable hard drive to use with my MacBook One, and it is taking a Time Machine backup as we speak. So for show and tell, what I've been playing around with this week is my LG Watch Urbane, which I've had for thanks, man. Which I've had for a while, and I used to have it paired with a specific phone. Now it's kind of a floater. I don't know. I can't really get the lighting right for you to be able to see it well, but now I kind of move it around between phones. So this week, I usually have my Nexus 6P, which is here. Make sure that's got no personal data shown on it. And unfortunately, it's got a wallpaper with my kids on it, so I'm not going to show that. One of the things I've been playing. So normally I have this paired with a Samsung Gear S2 wearable and my Jawbone up to fitness band, which, like I said, takes a hit to battery life. And typically, I wind up the end of the night anywhere between, say, 12% battery life and 25% battery life. And that's typically after a 21 to 21 hour day of it off the charger. So this week, I spent a day with it not paired with any wearable, and then I've been using it with the LG Watch Urbane. And just real quickly, we also talked about, using native apps on the Watch Urbane. One of the ones that I love is I just had it. So first of all, the one thing I use is the Wear Mini launcher. So rather than swiping or tapping or swiping, rather than swiping here and getting kind of the Google Now launcher or the stock Google launcher, I use. You may have just missed it. It's always tough to demo a watch. I use. Come on. I use a third-party launcher that's available for the watch called the Wear Mini launcher. So it's got a buzz handle here, so when you hit over here and then swipe, it brings up an individual app launcher. And some of the native apps that I use on this are, I particularly love this one. Let's see if I can get it to work. And it didn't come up.
So, I have a question about this. So, I've been thinking, smartwatches, they're pretty cool, but what I've been thinking is, are they actually that useful? Like, have they had any effect on like your day to day, getting work done? Has it been more efficient for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll talk about that in a sec. So one of these is
That's a preview, huh?
this is so what this is it is an app called Look Behind, and what it does is it actually accesses my smartphone's camera.
Mm-hmm.
And what it's doing is it's actually showing what my phone's camera can see. So this is useful if you've lost something, say underneath a car seat or behind a dresser, and you
Oh,
can't
yeah.
look through it.
That happens all the time.
Yes, it does. It does
All
absolutely.
right, you've convinced me. I'm buying one right now.
In fact, I used it the other day because in the car I had one of the kids in the car seat is right behind me, and I couldn't see them, and I was like, is she sleeping or not? So I brought this up, and put my phone behind my head and looked at her on the camera. And then this is one that only appeals to the OCD of us, but it's an app called Roll the Dice. So I believe in kind of just flipping a coin and making decisions that I don't want to have my brain occupied with. The glare is too bad, you can't see it, but there's like 4 6-sided dice on the screen here, and you can just tap it, and it randomly generates a number for you. So, like I said, that's tough to see on the camera. But you're asking the utility of a smartwatch. There's a couple things. The most empowering thing about it is if you are somebody who has a long commute. And in my current job, I used to live about 75 miles away, so my commute was an hour and a half to 2 hours every day with traffic. The watch was invaluable then, because what it meant was during that time in the car, when it's just difficult for me to constantly be taking my eyes off the road and looking at my phone. Seeing notifications come in on my watch, especially when my youngest kid was 1 year old or whatnot. The phone just gave me the watch gave me increased situational awareness to know when something that really required my attention was needed. So I could see messages coming from my wife. I could pull over on the side of the highway if I really needed to get in touch with her. Here's a big thing, particularly if you're married and you have a long commute. The message you don't want to miss is the message from your wife telling you to stop and pick up dinner. Okay?
Hey.
So,
because you get home and all you want to do is shoot everybody and then yourself, because that is the worst.
Right. So yeah, arriving home to an aggravated wife and screaming kids who are hungry, not good. So yeah, that's so huge, getting that notification on the watch, being able to read it and say, oh, I need to pull over and order dinner and pick it up when I get back into town. That's awesome. When work, if somebody would call me from work, because I forward my work phone to my personal when I leave the office. So being able to see that a phone call is coming in from a West Coast customer, and being able to take it rather than making that customer wait for 2 hours for me to get home, it was also huge. It's great. I'm somebody who is, again, a little OCD, so constantly needs to keep up to date with what's on my calendar. So being able to get that on the watch, being able to sit in meetings and look at notifications coming in without picking up my phone, even though there's still some social negativity around somebody who's constantly checking their watch. But my company is a pretty technically progressive company, so yeah, I think for me there's been a lot of increased utility. Another big thing, and this is the side effect, is that having what you do with a watch is essentially triage your notifications, right?
Yes.
It reorients you from this nascent smartphone mentality of paying attention to every single notification that comes in, and wires you into this triage of the notifications you need to pay attention to now, the notifications you need to remember to go back and take a look at, and the notifications that aren't pertinent at that point in time at all. Mm-hmm. And that's what it does. And so I've gone from being a person who used to jump at every single smartphone notification that came in to being a person who, like I am at work, only pays attention to the critical stuff when it hits, accommodates some others when I have time, and then kind of catalogs in my brain things I need to look to when I'm at home during computer time at like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So yeah, for me the wearables have been huge. And I definitely miss wearing them. Like the days that I don't have them, I definitely regret like not wearing my smartwatch. So, and then the last thing, I talked about being more religious about doing backups, and I don't know if I've ever shown my Tesseract or my Autobot Matrix of Leadership here, the IC dock. Love this thing. I used to be a NAS guy, and I had problems with the D-Link NAS I had and kind of the proprietary OS that it ran inside the box. And how it kind of hard-coded a bit to the hard drive when it initially accepted it to a bay. It made it impossible to move the drives around as you wanted to hot swap drives or upgrade it. So I was like, never doing that again. So this box is less smart. It's really not running a whole operating system stack. It's just got enough firmware in there to run the lights and the fan. Windows takes care of everything else. So I don't need to worry about a third operating system increasing the complexity of my interaction with the box. But this one accommodates a USB 3.0 and eSATA. And then you have a hard power switch here. You got a big honking, I think this is an 80 millimeter fan up front. Might be 120.
Looks like a 120.
Yeah. If you buy one of these, don't make the mistake of thinking that this is a handle. It is not. It routes I/O from the back panel to the front. The first time I thought it was a handle, and I picked it up by it. One of these connectors detached, and I almost lost the whole thing. Ooh. So, and it looks really cool. Like I said,
You really should put a cover over that.
Yeah. Right. It looks like you would be able to throw it in if you removed both your 5.5-inch drive covers. It looks like you'd be able to slide it right on in.
Yeah, this sucker is heavy. I'm always sweating whenever I'm handling it and picking it up. But I'm opening the drive bay now.
Looks fairly sturdy.
Yeah, it definitely is. It has, it has lights for all 4 drives. You can set the lights. You can set the light intensity from low to high, and you can set the fan speed from low to high or off. And like I said, it doesn't make things complex by putting a ton of smarts in there. Like other things like this would have software controls for the fan speed and the lights and all that, and it's just not necessary. So this has 4 drive bays in it. You can pop any of these cages out. I think I have 3.5. I think I have about 5 gigs of storage rigged in here now. I have a 2 gigabyte, a 2 terabyte, a 1.5 terabyte, and 2 750 gig drives in here. You can easily copy back and forth. You can easily swap these. It doesn't monkey with the hard drives to make that difficult. I can yank any of these drives out anytime I want to. Another cool thing I have is I have a 5 terabyte or a 6 terabyte USB external drive that I use to back this up. So, some people might ask, well, if you could have just gotten it all in one drive, why didn't you do that? Well, number one, because there wasn't a 6 terabyte drive available when I bought this, but also that I can scale this without buying a whole additional unit, right? I can pop drives out, and I have. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, does it have support for RAID?
I believe it does. I've elected to never use RAID in an external
device.
An external device. I just I haven't. I haven't used RAID before, but it seems like a nice way to set up things. I like RAID. I like RAID 10 specifically.
Yes.
Yeah, I like it in a system or in a server, but I've never been able. I mean, if I were going to set up mirroring, right, I would need to have more than one IC dock, right? So I just haven't been able to afford that level of a solution. But yeah, so I burn, I put system images on that using a Cronus True Image, and then keep backups of like all my photos, all my videos. And all my pertinent documents on that. I do have to move it around from PC to PC to get those backups. But what I realize is, using that versus a NAS, like the NAS was up and running all the time, and I very rarely had a need to actually get stuff from it. And if I need to move stuff from PC to PC now, I'll just either put it in the cloud if it's a non-confidential artifact, or with the advent, now with thumb drives, right? You used to be thumb drive challenge, especially to move multimedia around, but I've got 128 gigabyte thumb drives and 32 gigabyte thumb drives and 1 to 2 terabyte portable USB drives. So it's just not a problem to move data around like it used to be. So that's it for me, and that's it for the episode. Anything else you guys wanted to go over?
Oh yeah, I got a Raspberry Pi too.
Oh, nice.
Fun! I've got one.
It's very nice. I like
Nice.
it. I like the ability to install different versions of Linux on it. I like that it runs like a smaller OS than usual, which is nice.
Right. Right.
I don't
What are you
particularly.
going to use yours for?
I'm still deciding on that. I think I'm actually going to try and create myself a small, like, portable Linux box that I can use for whatever, like a handheld sort of. But it runs something like, I don't know, Arch. I'm thinking it'll run Arch because I don't particularly like Debian's package manager myself.
Yeah.
Not really a fan of it.
All right. Well, and the last thing I should mention, because I forgot, is be sure to check out our tech coverage on the site. We're starting to try to amp it up. So there are articles posted now with a breakdown of the recent Microsoft earnings report. And in this, we focused on what that earnings report said about hardware and games, because we are primarily a geek site, not necessarily a tech site. So I wanted to focus it on what would mean the most to nerds who are into comics, movies, games, and TV. And there's also a breakdown and discussion of recent sales on the BlackBerry Priv, which was recently marked down to $640, and the Moto X Pure Edition, which was recently marked down to $350. I should say, although in both of those I kind of list some negative reasons or negative things against both of those devices, I would say of the two, the sale on the Moto X Pure Edition is the one that not only is the better, but I think it actually rocks. There are some questionable things about the Moto X Pure Edition. I just wanted people to be aware of those items before they bought. It was not necessarily an endorsement to not buy that device. I think $350 for a flagship Android device that still definitely holds its own, not just holds its own, but performs well amongst other devices powered by a Snapdragon 808 or 810. And the only thing you're going to get that's better than it is if you make the jump to a Snapdragon 820 processor in devices that recently released, like the Galaxy S7, Galaxy S7 Edge, HTC 10, or LG G5. For which you're going to pay $700 or more if you're buying it off contract. This is a flagship device that's $350 and definitely puts it in the sweet spot of where non-flagship kind of mid-range phones normally sell at their brand new price. So, and the thing I love about the Moto X Pure Edition is you can customize it 9 ways to Sunday to make it what you want. In fact, every time I talk about this device and look at it being on sale for $350, I'm like, why am I not buying this? Like, just for a what the heck device, just because it's so inexpensive. So give those articles a look and keep your eye out on the site. We'll definitely be trying to get some things up there more regularly from a news perspective, and we're trying to do more than just reporting the news. We're really wanting to also provide some analysis on that news to ensure we inform you why it's relevant and what you should watch out for, besides just the fact that it's a news announcement. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining in, everybody. Ethan, thanks for joining in. Kyle, thanks so much for joining in. As always, we should be back in another 2 weeks, and keep your eye out for when this is posted over on the GWW.com, and head over there to read the articles, because that's what we need you to do. We love you watching the videos, but we need you to read the articles too.
All right.
All right. And that is a wrap.